Welcome to Raw and Refined, the Gentleman's Hour, where we're going to have conversation with middle-aged black men about what's going on. We welcome you to listen, comment, and like, and hopefully encourage others to join for future conversations as well. We always like to start off with a toast, and with that toast, it's because we are gentlemen and we do it raw and refined.
Let's talk about our beverages. Now, who was saying that you said you had a drink for us, or John said you had
Yeah,
a
yeah,
drink
yeah.
for us, or
No,
something
so
like that?
I've got
Or
a,
not, yeah.
a little holiday cocktail that folks may want to think about. Fits in with the season,
Okay.
and what I have is I've discovered I love eggnog, so I only drink it during the holiday time. So
Mm-hmm.
I've got me a little eggnog with Coke Zero, and it makes it like a little dirty cocktail type deal. You can always add a splash of spirits depending on what you like. So be it rum, be it bourbon, be it whiskey, just a shot. You don't need to fill it up type deal, just to give it a little extra oomph to it. Or you could go without and it
Mm-hmm.
still gives you this almost like a float type taste to it. So that's something to
Very good,
Mm-hmm.
John.
consider throughout the holidays. You do two parts, whatever that pop is, and one part the eggnog, and then, like I said, just a splash of spirits if you
Okay.
decide you want to add that to it as well.
Wow.
Well,
Okay.
I get you got to be hanging with some
Oh,
boricuas and get you some
coquitos is the
coquito.
bomb, dog.
That's what
Yes,
it sounds like.
we have a recipe for that as well. So yeah, that may be
All right,
the
there you
next
go.
episode. But yes, coquitos are the bomb, man, for sure.
Nice.
Oh,
Yes.
it's that season.
Yeah, I had never thought about that, John. I might have to give that a try because I dig the nog as well for the season. And, the missus is allergic to
Mm.
dairy. So Khalifa Farm, I think it's called. I call all that stuff Wiz Khalifa milk. That's not. It's like Khalifa Farms. It's not his stuff, but they make an oat milk nog that tastes
Okay.
very close to traditional cow's milk eggnog. So she gets to. So I was like, I use that for stuff because she can drink that too. But yeah, I love eggnogs in general, so I might have to
Try
try
that,
that
and
out. Just
you could
check
do
that
that
out.
with the
That's
Diet
with
Dr
a little
Pepper as well
bourbon.
if you wanted to, and that would again give it kind of like I said that float
Hmm.
flavor to it, but it's real tasty.
Yeah, because that's what I'm rocking today, GK. I was telling them every blue moon because I don't like to do much of the artificial sweeteners, but Diet Dr. Pepper tastes like real Dr. Pepper, which I've always loved. So every blue moon I have one of those. So that's what I got today.
Well, I got my favorite coffee in the world. I'm not a big
Hmm.
coffee drinker, but I drink Phil's coffee, which is like, and not all Phil's. One particular thing is called Filtered Soul,
Yep.
which is
I
like,
remember
it's
you
got,
saying that before.
yo, that's
That's
what
it.
I'm at. Is the best.
I'm
I
gonna
don't
have to
even,
go
it's
back
like,
through the episodes because he
Yep.
said that very phrase before. I don't drink coffee much, but when I
It's
do,
got to be filled.
it's
but when I
Phil's.
do,
And that'd be the filtered soul. The filtered soul. I'm like, okay, he getting his. I don't drink very often, but what I do.
stay thirsty, my friends. So we are glad to be back with y'all. I know we started talking a little bit about the De La Soul album. If I could take a short detour,
Hmm.
the great De La Soul as a band, late 80s hip hop. Holloway was an early adopter of hip hop. I was later. And De La Soul was the group that kind of made me think of it as hip hop. De La Soul, Big Daddy Kane, and Tribe later. They came out with an album after Dave Trugoy the Dove passed away. And so that's what I've been listening to a lot lately. So we talked a little bit about that and how old school it is in our mid-late 50s, having MCs play music that like you can relate to. So really, really excited about that. So I just wanted to
I
start off
appreciate
with
that.
that
Give
part.
it a shout out, bro.
I
Let
think that's
the
great.
listeners check it out, man. It's on point.
Yeah. And then I think we still have some more shooting to do with Aaron and Kevin from the Rubber Room. So fans will get it. We shot part of that already, but we've got some more to do with them. So looking forward to that. So shout out to them. And I think as we shoot part two, that'll be a great time to get their
Mhm.
thoughts on them, that album too, son. So Let's bring them in. And I think, John, that'll also be a way that we can bring you into the conversation as well. Because you weren't rolling with us back then because you weren't even in the area for a lot of
Right.
it at that point, but you already have consumed that whole
Right.
album. So
Yep.
perfect. Perfect.
Well,
Yeah.
but what's fascinating about the album, I can't even think of the song. I was listening to it the other day. Like it dovetails perfectly with our subject today.
hmm
No, I was gonna
Um,
say that the De La Soul album, there's a couple verses that Pasta News
hmm
talks about the subject that we are gonna cover, which is loneliness and the notion of being alone and its impact on health individually and the health of the culture and society. We've talked about this. One of the things I love about music, love about us is like we can create community with each other through sound and through conversation. But we have a whole society now, particularly amongst males, but I don't think it's just males, who are basically struggling with loneliness. I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe a little longer, that it was actually named an epidemic by the Surgeon General of the United States, right? That says that basically the lack of connection is killing people, like literally killing people, it's breaking up society. And so it's a national epidemic, and it also plays itself out in personal ways. Goal in this conversation, I think, is to talk about what loneliness is, how do we build connection and community amongst each other, and really, like, at the end of the day, unless we figure this thing out as a country and society, we're gonna go backwards. And so on a personal note, think I've been thinking about this even before the Surgeon General mentioned it, because y'all know for a living, my job is I organize people, which ultimately means bringing people together. And what I observed is that the real power of sort of what I do isn't really in what we do, isn't really in the success. Like you fight for stuff all the time, but it's in this idea that you bring a bunch of people together and you create community. And people like commit to community, right? They don't always commit to fighting, but they commit
right.
to the community. And so I think we have an opportunity even in this moment to reconnect people. Like that's what Facebook, that's what social media really is about. It's a kind of community, a kind of connection. We can critique whether it's good connection, bad connection, but ultimately it really is about bringing people together in connection. So we'll talk a little bit about loneliness, how it impacts our health individually and collectively. There's all kinds of data around elderly people, like they do better when they're in community with other people. We know that young folks do better when they're in community with other kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've got to really be intentional about thinking about this question of community and what loneliness means to folks. So,
Mm-hmm.
John, as a medical doctor, what's your take on that?
No, you're absolutely right, GK. I mean, loneliness, we know, and we'll talk more about it, affects not just our mental health, but our physical health as well. And studies have already shown that how much it can impact folks who have high blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease. So people who've had cardiac procedures, they actually encourage that social connection or community because studies have shown that the outcome is a much better when they have that support versus if they're trying to deal with what's going on by themselves. So I'm excited about us having this conversation today, GK. With it, it is the season where loneliness can really tie into other
Yeah.
things. And we'll probably get into a little something else that affects us, and that's that seasonal affective disorder or SAD.
Mm,
And loneliness is really a big component of that. But we'll have some good conversation about that as we go on. So great intro for us, my brother. Great intro.
Yeah.
Holloway, what you think, man?
I think a lot of the things that we talk about come back to just a few simple things. And I think one of the things you said was that, and that was connection. No, and that's so I think that's more so on the side of how do we try to mitigate this reality? How do we try and improve it for people who are dealing with this? But I think with everything, we can kind of think about things in two ways, and it's dealing with it after it's happened or trying to prevent it before it happens. And but either way, ultimately, we're trying to deal with this thing, this loneliness epidemic, as you described it. How do we help the people who are dealing with it? How do we help some people avoid going down that path?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now I am like not trying to like sell the book, but this is a book called Together, and it was actually written by the old Surgeon General Vivek Murthy. It's a whole book,
Yes.
The Healing Power of Human Connection in a Sometimes Lonely World. And I haven't finished it. I'm like a third of the way through. I was like, man, this is fascinating. So there's all kind of actual science behind it and data. It's not just like this feeling that we have, but it's actually stuff that people study to make sense of. Some people use the word loneliness. Sometimes us as males probably don't like the word loneliness, which kind of has its own meaning. But maybe disconnection or whatever, it's got to be some actual word we use other than loneliness. But it's important that we, I think, talk about it even more.
Well, let's get into it, brothers. I mean, I think one of the things that you've been bringing up as well, GK and Rich, is that there is a physical and mental cost to this thing we call loneliness. And I think in some circles, just like you said, is it disconnection? Is it loneliness? Is it social isolation?
Social isolation,
These are things,
Yeah,
yes,
that's a good term there.
as well. And when Dr. Murphy was kind of first talking about this, he had recognized that about 1 in 3 American adults have reported feeling lonely regularly. Man, that's one of us. I mean, we are the
I was
three,
just
and
of
that
the
makes
I was
three.
just
one of
saying that
us.
was like one of y'all two been having some issues y'all ain't told me about.
Right, exactly, exactly. So that rocked
No,
me
but
when I
seriously,
heard
this yeah,
that.
1 in 3. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
And
I'm
how quiet
lonely.
that stays
I need
because
someone to
how
talk
surprised
to.
we are to hear that, right? You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? So that's
Well, of course,
impactful.
it's important to say, though, his analysis is that people think of loneliness as like literal, like being alone,
Right.
Right.
right? But yeah, but it's not just
You
like
can
being
be
by yourself.
lonely in a crowd of people as well. And
Yeah.
that's the thing that I think will help kind of work that through as we continue on in this conversation as well. But just a few, for some reason, I like to give a few statistics on some things here. So I'm gonna start us off with some of that too. 29% increase in the risk of heart disease for folks that deal with loneliness or social isolation. 32% increased risk of stroke. That's a third again, brothers. That's a
Yep.
third right there of both of those cardiovascular events.
Yep.
We've seen that it can increase inflammation in our bodies, lower our immune response, so therefore more likelihood to get these viruses, colds, COVID, things of that nature because of that. And
And
that
just a few weeks ago, we talked about inflammation in our high blood pressure episode. So,
Mhm.
now all of our listeners actually know what inflammation is.
exactly. And then higher early mortality, brothers. That's the thing. So this is preventable. Okay, this is something that we can reverse. This is something that we can do. And as we said, we're going to have some great conversation about some opportunities there as well. But we
Yep.
also know that loneliness is a contributor to depression. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about that seasonal affective disorder. It can affect our sleep patterns as well. And we then start to just withdraw. So that's where, said earlier that loneliness doesn't have to be you are physically by yourself. You can be lonely in a crowd of people because now you started to withdraw from what's going on around
So it's
you
a behavior.
internally.
It becomes a behavior.
It becomes a behavior. That's it right there, Rick. That's it right there. So what I've seen, yes, it can definitely affect high blood pressure. We talked about inflammation, like you said, Rick, in our other episode as well. But loneliness can definitely lead to that as well. Unmanaged diabetes. So of course, if you feel there's nothing for you to strive for, then you're not doing the things that you could be doing to help your blood pressure, help your diabetes, help your cholesterol be lower. And then as a result, you start to feel this unexplained fatigue. So sometimes people coming in, they're like, Doc, why am I just tired all the time? And, we're talking through some things and talking through some physical things. And then I just sometimes have to ask the question. I mean, tell me how you feel. Are you feeling down? Are you feeling alone? Are you feeling
Mm-hmm.
depressed? Because that could be the main reason why you feel fatigued, tired, unexplained, sleeplessness, and things of that nature as well. What you think, Rick?
I think having that kind of conversation is important in that people don't automatically make those connections, right? And so you don't think that that the right hand is impacting the left hand, so to speak. Sometimes when people don't think about the connections between the emotional and the spiritual and the physical parts of our whole being. So I think that's really important to be able to, again, try and have those conversations with people. I think, as Greg said, I'll kind of come from a personal perspective. The social isolation, the loneliness, like you said, it doesn't have to necessarily be a physical thing. You don't have to be living in a cave, keeping yourself physically away from everybody. And then sometimes it doesn't even have to be about the whole of you. And I'll give you the example, right? The early years of my being a diabetic, I was isolated, or I felt isolated
Mm-hmm.
because of just a general lack of knowledge about this, right? About diabetes in general, about even who had diabetes. In the other podcast I've been working on, John, you know that one, Breaking the Sugar Cycle, talking about it. One of the things I talked about was how early on I didn't know how many people in my own family were diabetics, right? That information wasn't even being shared until after I was diagnosed with it. Then I'm having conversation. Oh yeah, such and such has it. So and so has
Yeah.
it. This one
Yep.
has it. That one has it. So aside from the fact that I'm like, well, damn, maybe we all at these family get-togethers need to be eating a few more salads instead of all
Instead
of
of the
these
ribs.
All
cakes
that good
sitting
old
in the.
banana pudding and
No,
peach
don't mess
cobbler and
right.
all
Don't be
that good
messing with the
stuff. Right.
ribs, Greg. No, that's
Right.
fine. Just a little less sauce, brother. But don't you
Right.
get
Right.
ridiculous over here. But no, these need for communication, how
Right.
that is. But
Yeah.
this feeling of isolation, to
Yeah.
your points earlier, because of this very specific thing. We're talking in other situations, as family members, we're doing this or we're doing that, but we're not talking about all of this. And so the isolation is, in this case, is specific to this part of me or this condition that I have, and the need to have conversation, the need to connect with people that know more about it, the need to connect with my family members so we can all work on it together, or things of that nature. But this isolation is still prevalent and it's still important because of that impact it's potentially having on me. And I think it was in my earlier years of dealing with this. And so part of that connection for me was you, John, talking to you about it over the years, having a place and space to bounce off, just having conversations about things that I've learned along the way, telling you this or that. And you're validating it for me or verifying it and saying, well, that's not the magic bullet. It'll help. But again, so I don't feel at this point, because I've been dealing with it for decades, and thankfully I've gotten to a better place with accepting it, accepting the realities of it, and learning how to deal with it effectively. And that's through connection. It's through talking to other people. It's through feeling comfortable enough with the need to be vulnerable that we all have built into us to ask for help and ask questions. Because
Yeah,
it's
and I
gonna do
want
what
to
it's gonna do. Whether
exactly.
you
It
you know,
is.
it's
It
gonna
is.
do what it's gonna do anyway. So
Yeah.
And I think this a concept has always been around. I think that why it's become more prevalent, even for a Surgeon General, to bring it up in conversation is when we went through COVID. COVID put us in isolation, so to
Yeah.
speak. And in
right,
doing so, you really saw a lot more issues around loneliness and depression and anxiety
Yep.
and other things as relates to that. And I think we're still trying to come out of that as well too. So that was a
you're
major,
right.
man. COVID was major, dog. So it's
Yeah.
impacted a lot of things that we're still seeing now as well.
Yep. Yep. I think that you nailed it. There's a way in which COVID like broke so many social networks, the ways that people connected. I hadn't heard of this notion of the so-called, they call it the third space or something. Like I hadn't ever even heard of a thing like that. But it's this place that you just go, like you just randomly in your neighborhood or wherever you go, you just randomly stop off at. You just see your random person you see once a month. And that's where we make our biggest kinds of connection with people. And COVID just completely disrupted all of that.
Yeah,
And
it was like the storm. You know how they say a really bad storm, it reveals what's not strong and what is strong. You know, it destroys the things that aren't strong and it reveals the things that are. And so we saw that in terms of social connections. We saw that in terms of a lot of things. COVID was a storm that just came in and said, and, you know,
yeah,
we saw how fragile social connections are, but we also saw how important they are.
particularly for, I think, folks of color, like, like once you
and
understand
people
culture.
of a certain age, you know,
Yep.
as
Yep.
we got
Right.
older, as you get older, we naturally see that there's less connection, right? Because of the unfortunate reality is that as we age, more of us die off. So some of those connections are lost that way. You know, younger generations might not really know the older generations as well. And then depending on how people are raised and whether or not that's important to stay connected to those generations. So that becomes all gets stretched out even more. So those just kind of naturally, you know, unless you work on those things, they're
Right.
gonna drift further and further apart kind of naturally, unfortunately.
And from that experience, for some, it opened opportunities for us to understand or appreciate other ways of communication. But we have to realize something too, bros, is that for folks who are underrepresented, folks of color, folks that are rural, folks that did not have, quote, good Wi-Fi connection, have iPads or those type of devices where they can hop on a Zoom or Teams or Skype or whatever that was that we used to have in the day as well.
That was a thing, wasn't it?
Right. I mean, that was
COVID
even
versus
more.
Zoom.
Right. More isolation going on there because not only are we saying you need to stay home, but as you were referencing, GK, I couldn't go to Phil's to go, just get my coffee on a whim because they were closed down and things of this nature as well. So now it's like, dang, wait a minute. This isn't it type deal for me. And that brought about a lot of these feelings and
Right.
emotions
You know,
as a
John,
result.
Regina and I we started just driving around the neighborhood early in COVID because where we lived, it's not rural, but it's suburban, but not a dense suburban. Because a lot
You in
of
the
it,
country, Holloway. You in the country.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Almost in the country. You know, since we've lived out here, it's been built up more. But yeah, and so it would be well, it's a lot of warehouses too now. But the point was, we would get out and just drive around because the fact that we wouldn't see anyone. So just to see people, because there were people out and about who had jobs that they were essential workers, and so and stores were still open, even though wow, that's crazy. You remember? I've forgotten that at one point they had like out here there were certain hours of day that you could go out and do stuff early on, right? And that kind of things. And
Right.
when we go to the grocery store, there'd be police officers posted up in the parking lots, so that because people were clowning, right? And all of that's had become so far in the back. But early on, when everybody first was locked down, staying home in the house, we got into the habit of just getting out and going and taking a drive, like a 20-minute drive around the neighborhood just to see people, just to see people.
Yeah.
Well, we know that there are all kinds of cultural and political implications of social isolation, right? Like if you look at our current political environment, a lot of it has to do with folks feeling isolated. You have people in rural areas mad at folks in the city. Like, I don't quite know why, but it's really a thing that we've got to figure out because I think it has all kinds of implications for culturally, politically, economically. And I imagine that's partly why Dr. Murphy called it a sort of a national health crisis, because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, there are like real life, consequences to the notion of loneliness.
Yeah. Like you said, practically, politically, when you think about if I'm isolated, it's easier to control the sources of information, right? There are no other there are fewer opportunities for alternate perspectives to make their way in, right? Hence, it's easier once I've got you going down a particular rabbit hole. And then there's all kinds of neuroscience behind all of this stuff that they're doing on social media, and they're figuring out the ways to push the right buttons to keep you locked in, right? We know that certain emotions chemically only last about 90 seconds. But if I can keep hitting that button, we can keep repeating that 90-second loop almost infinitely. But it's crazy if you limit the opportunities for other perspectives. If you're doing it personally, or if you're allowing it to be done to you, or whatever the case may be, that isolation, again, it's not always physical isolation, but it could be, like you said, if I limit it in any way, or if I allow others to limit it for me, I'm locked into a view, or I'm being programmed by a view, or in either way, I'm not even considering all these other alternative options that are so close around me, but I don't see them, I don't hear them. But yeah, that whole thing with the Wi-Fi, and as you were saying, that's why we saw a growth in satellite also during COVID. Satellite internet started growing. I mean, they started working on increasing the available bandwidth so that they were like, wow, this is, there's a huge need for it. And a lot of it got spurred on by the need to be able to facilitate online education, since we brought everybody home all of a sudden. But yeah.
Yeah, no, this social media thing, man, it's something in and of itself, and I think we've commented that how it creates connection without intimacy. I like that terming of it as well, and in doing so has contributed to isolation as well. With this climate that we're in and that you were referencing earlier, GK. I mean, in some cases, it's probably ended some friendships
Yeah.
because of views, and how that's continued stimulation of views, as you said, Rich, is continuing. So now you get into your mindset to where you don't even have a filter anymore on things that you're doing or saying. And that's when who you not understanding what you're doing, whom you thought was a friend of yours, you're like, well, wait a minute. You know that's me you talking about right there. You don't understand that because they don't
we
even
have a collective
have that
teacher
filter.
that's that way. But I'll let who's like
Mm-hmm.
gone off the deep end. Like, how is that? Anyway,
Right.
like, how'd you wind up there?
Right. Right. I know.
No, this is just the opportunity to reveal where I always was.
Yep.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
Living off her pension, off our tax dollars too, by the way.
Yep.
But yeah.
No. I'm just going to say that affects, us as Black men in a way that and we talked about this with John Henryism conversations, with the aspect of not being able to be vulnerable, as well. And what is loneliness? Loneliness is vulnerability to the max, because you have no support. If you're feeling lonely, you feel like you have no support. But as Black men, especially, and I'm sure men in general as well, we can't kind of show that to others, because then we are showing our vulnerabilities and what others, not what we're saying, but what others may seem to think might be a weakness for them as well.
I got a saying for you that popped into my head earlier when I was thinking about today's conversation, and I don't know if I've heard it somewhere before, and if I did, and I'm failing to attribute it to somebody. My bad. But essentially, it's the need to be vulnerable is not a vulnerability.
Right. Exactly.
We all need to be vulnerable, right?
Yep.
We
and
need
feel
to have
comfortable
we need safe spaces, right?
Yeah.
Where we
Yes.
can be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Who that is
Yes.
with or where that is,
Yeah.
that is a human need.
Yeah.
It is
Yes.
something that we as men often neglect. It is
Yes.
something that we're often mis-socialized to think we don't need it or something like that, or that even that having this need is a vulnerability. It is
Yep.
not a vulnerability. It
Right.
is part of who we are, right? And
Yep.
so don't confuse the need to be vulnerable in safe ways and safe places with a vulnerability. It is not a vulnerability. It is not a liability. It's just something that we need. And that is,
Right.
I think, it's anti-loneliness, as you were saying. You know,
Right.
if I can be vulnerable with someone or someone's in certain places or spaces,
Right.
then I am not isolated. I am not
Not
alone.
alone.
Right.
Yep.
And because I'm enriching whatever it is that I need emotionally and spiritually through these other people.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And that's building those social connections. I've got a group here that it's called Men Talk 2 that allows for that open space, safe space to be able to have these kind of conversations. Let's build the relationships. You know, I've got you guys. I've got my Howard
Yep.
crew that's with me as well. But I think it's
Man, the random texts we send each other, man,
right.
it's like
Mhm.
gold. Right.
Right.
Mhm.
That's connection.
That's connection,
Mhm.
and we need that, bros. That's the whole thing behind that. And then for women that are in our lives, they need to hear that as well because
Mhm.
again, society, history, things of that nature has made it such that your man is strong. You know, he don't have any weaknesses.
Mhm.
He doesn't understand what vulnerability is type deal. And that's who that's supposed to be. But Rich, you said it. The need for being vulnerable is not a vulnerability. It's
Mhm.
just a matter of personal wellness that needs
Mhm.
to be necessary and it needs to be accepted. So when a woman sees their man being vulnerable, don't knock him down. Or
Yeah.
don't call him a
You soft.
bitch or you
You
soft
soft.
or why what's up with that? Man up. Isn't that what it is? Man up, MF and things like that type deal. But
So we're all
that's where
soft.
they
We're made
need
of
that.
like what 70% water, right? Or some crazy number like that. We're all soft. I don't care how many push-ups and sit-ups you can do. I don't care how rock hard your abs are. You're
That's
still jiggly on the inside, you know.
Well, yeah, I mean, culturally, again, it's just important to remember that it's bigger than like culture. We're biologically designed to be with other people, right?
right.
Like
Mhm.
it's just like our instinct. It's like how we,
Dude, have you seen
evolved as humans.
have you ever watched how people drive? You ever notice that some people will always gravitate towards the other cars on the highway?
Yeah.
It's kind of annoying to me
Yeah.
sometimes. I'm like, could all just flow smoothly, but there are some people they
Mhm.
just automatically bunch together.
Yeah.
They just want to drive by other cars. They don't want to be alone. I'm like, but
Yes.
it's just this need, this built in. You know, you see it when the animals are on the
Yes.
Serengeti and they're all. But it's part of how we're programmed and wired.
Yep.
We're not wired to automatically isolate.
Yeah.
And it shows up in so many ways. So sports, for example,
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
people be mad at like there's so much investment in sports, but
Mm-hmm.
at its core, it's really about people being together. You
Mm-hmm.
man, every day of the week you might be by yourself, but
Mhm.
you you see the Bears, see the
Mhm.
Bulls. It's like that's why 60,000, 100,000 people go and like this idea of people coming together.
We
Mhm.
Uh,
won.
yeah, we
We
won. It's
won. We're
Right.
like you
all.
actually did something
Right.
yourself to make
Mm-hmm.
it happen.
Right.
It gets to the heart of who we are. This notion of connection and like familiarity and the cultures. It's just a fascinating thing. And I just think it's important for us to understand that.
Yeah, I agree. And brothers, if you give me a moment, I think I'm gonna try to tie this into that seasonal affective disorder that we've been
Yeah.
mentioning as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jump on in there
Yes, sir.
because it's winter, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is right on
About
time. We're
late fall.
Right. We've already
Exactly.
gone through daylight savings time for those of us in the Midwest that still dealing with this foolishness.
The leaves are basically gone at this point.
Yeah.
Right. So this is when it's hitting. And again, loneliness along with this seasonal affective disorder can kind of really hit us,
Especially when you're
kind
black.
of hard.
We weren't made for this stuff.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I need the sun, brothers. I'm be honest with y'all. If I'm a whole different person until the sun comes out. So that's what
Man. Yeah.
seasonal affective disorder, it's a form of depression, and it's triggered by what we just said. It's reduced sunlight. It's usually going to occur during the fall and winter, but there have been some occasions where it's happened in the spring and summertime. But what we believe is happening from a chemical standpoint is that it's affecting serotonin and melatonin in our bodies, which is really what helps regulate our mood and our sleep cycles as well. So one might experience, a low feeling, depressed feelings. So they may be sleeping more, but not necessarily restful sleep. They may be feeling fatigued or just, I just can't get up and go type feeling. They no longer interested in watching that Bulls game or Bears game coming on because of how they're doing. And for us as the diabetics in this group, Rick, now we start craving them carbs and sweets because that's kind of a comfort that can occur there as well too. And that's not good, in and of itself. And then they start having issues with trouble concentrating and doing what? Withdrawing even more from social interaction, which builds into that loneliness as well. So all of this is what we call a seasonal isolation cycle, man. It's just a revolving loop. More you feel low, depressed, fatigued, the more you're going to feel lonely about that and that you're the only one dealing with this. And why am I having to go through this? But yet, I'm not telling anybody what I'm going through. I'm not communicating with my folks about what's going on with me. So now I'm developing that cycle of loneliness, which is feeding back into this whole loop as well. But there are a few things we can do, brothers. I mean, for us as black men, one of the things I've noticed and we've noticed from a medical standpoint, vitamin D.
Yes, sir.
Brothers, black folks, we got to get those vitamin D levels checked, okay? Our melanin that's in our system that gives us our color, our tone, actually reduces our body's ability to synthesize vitamin D from the sun. So that's why it could be very important, especially if you're feeling this way, where we have even less sun interaction, to have your vitamin D levels checked. Normal vitamin D level is at least above 30. And some suggest that optimal levels are between 40 and 80. So you may have to talk to your providers about some vitamin D supplementations out there to help give you and help you maintain those levels, which in turn has brought about just a feeling of wellness. It's like, wow, I didn't realize how I was feeling until now I've got my vitamin D levels up to where they're supposed to be. And I feel better. And that was really the only thing that was done, was that you now have gotten that up, which really has helped a lot. Some things that can contribute though, bruh, a lot. One is getting hit with a major health issue. It may be losing jobs. And we talked about the political landscape and the climate that we're in. We had the close down of the government. There's been folks without jobs, federal layoffs, things of that nature that have been happening. All of that now contributes to this overall feeling of isolation as well. But then empty nesting. 20 years mostly of our lives are we taking care of kids. Now, GK, you're going a little bit longer than us right now, but for the majority, right? I got love for my
It's
brother
gonna
right
be,
there,
that
and
road is a
my
little
nieces
longer
over
for
there
me.
as well. But that's where a lot of our time is taking care of them, right? So now they're gone. It's like, well, wait a minute, what we doing here type deal. And then the other side of that is retirement. So it's losing a sense of what we consider purpose. All right. Work we consider purpose and things of that nature. So when we're getting to that point where I know we're thinking about retiring and things like that, I say,
Yeah.
look, we got to still have a plan, folks. I mean, we're still young in my mind, but we still are at a point where we could think about retiring from the work that we're currently doing. But that doesn't mean you now just sit down and, I guess I'll see what's on the TV 24/7 type deal. No, that's not what that needs
Speak
to
for
be.
yourself,
Yeah,
John.
right, right. There you go. There you go. But it's
My
that, brothers.
portfolio ain't saying the same thing as yours, brother.
right.
I got a few more years of building to do.
Right. Hey, I get it, brother. Trust me, I get it. But doing something, being active, joining groups, fraternities, things like that were great outlets for us to be able to keep connected. Light therapy, even still being in sunlight, having that natural light can just still stimulate some wellness in us. It may not build up that vitamin D like I was saying before, and we may still need some supplementation to help us with that, but it still can offer some benefits there as well. So those are some
You're getting
things
the
since I know we
emotional,
were talking about. Yes.
you're getting the
Go ahead, Rick.
emotional benefits. You're getting to, the emotional benefits from that light therapy, but you still need to then take your vitamin D pill,
To get the physical right.
to get that. But yeah, because if you can get enough sun, that's the best way to get vitamin D. But the reality is that's why it's seasonal, right? The sun hits from a different angle in the wintertime and the cold hits hard. Let's be real, it's a special group of people that keep running, until the snow is on the ground, or they keep their bikes out there. It's hard.
I always say that Jim Crow had to be a bad MF because millions of black people left to come to the cold of Detroit, Chicago, Cleveland, and stayed. And then had other people come with them.
Yeah, well, jobs
before weather forecasts and stuff. Can you imagine that first winter cold?
You right, brother. You right.
Down there.
I mean, people still call all the time and say, "I'm coming to Chicago in January. What kind of coat should I get?" Well, they don't even care. They don't even sell them in your stores.
Right.
The coat that you should get for Chicago winter. You need to just go ahead and bundle up in whatever you got and then buy you a good coat while you're here. If you're going to be here for a minute. And then you'll have that for every time you come to visit. And when you go other cold places, but you live in New Mexico, they don't sell a coat there that's going to work here. Don't go buy no, it ain't going to work.
Well, now I will say this, and you might need to edit this, but New Mexico actually gets cold.
Yeah, it does.
Because they actually at a high altitude. But I know what you're trying to say. The desert states, that's the issue there. But I found that out as well. Man, they traveling to New Mexico, they were actually should have already had snow on the ground. And I'm like, my gosh.
Dude, when we went on safari while we were over in South Africa, it was nice and 85, 90-degree weather during the day. But when we was out there on the safari, when the sun went down, we was pulling out the blankets on the truck, because that temperature drop. It's like, whoa, it get
right. But we know what you're saying, though, Rick. We know what you're saying.
Yeah, we do.
You talked about a lot of stuff there, John. As it related to the seasonal affective disorder, this what feels like winter loneliness. It's for real. Winter loneliness is a real thing that we got to be paying attention to, not just for it's in addition to loneliness in general, that the epidemic that you've already discussed, Greg. Just the sad adds on top of it another layer of we need to be looking out for our people, who we already suspect might be dealing with some social isolation issues, or who are less social than others. When the winter and the cold is coming, we need to be paying a little more attention to those people, because they might have sad on top of their other social
It's literally one of the reasons why the holidays can be so challenging. One of the reasons why holidays can be so challenging for folks. You add all those things together, and then the sense of loss that people experience. It's all interconnected. And the fascinating thing is that a lot of it is just simple biology, right? It isn't even like
Right.
It's not even like simple. So it's not social construct. It's actually biology. And then you add in the social and cultural constructs on
Right.
top of it, you know?
You said it, Greg, earlier, was that I can't believe we were placed here to be alone. I just think that the biology even is impacted by that, like you said, as well. And that's where that serotonin and other neurochemicals that go on, they're also driven and encouraged by a connection as well, too. And they run haywire when those connections aren't there as well. So I definitely feel that's a contributor to this too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
So in essence, go ahead, GK. Go ahead.
no, go ahead. Finish.
No. I was just going to say that what it says is that, especially during this time of the year, but year round, we got to work on being, purposeful, being intentional about reaching out, even if it
Yeah.
is just a quick text or a quick
Yeah.
phone call, or, even stopping by just to say, hey, just want to say, hey, how you doing type deal. I think sometimes we think we're going to get caught up and dang, I ain't got no half hour to be doing this type deal. But the benefit is not only what that person may receive from that interaction, but you receive something from that interaction as well. And it just can make the rest of your time, day, week, just a little bit better. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
John, you're so right. And then I want to challenge our listeners out there who might be on the other side of this, not the person that's making the call or making the text, but the person that's receiving the call or receiving the text, who might be struggling a little bit. My ask is that you take that step and you respond. You just say thanks, or I'm okay, or I'll hit you back later, something, but any kind of response so that that person that's putting forth that effort knows that they connected. And then that's also completing the connection, right? You're responding back, and just to your point too, John, about I don't have 30 minutes to get into this right now. That person that's receiving that call or that text, you might not want to get caught up in some conversation right now. You're really not feeling it right now, but
I'm feeling attacked right now,
right.
Holloway.
But Greg didn't even think about it that way. But yeah, just that. No,
in the church when the pastor starts talking,
He said hit dog, right?
A little fidget there. But yeah, no, just didn't even think about it that way, son. Just trying to say that helps, and that encourages that person who sent the text or who made the call. Now they feel like, okay, cool. All right, he's all right, or he might not be all right, but he's willing to reach back out, and cool. I'll leave him alone. I know he's straight, and then that oftentimes too will cut off the number of attempts that people are making, which can be annoying, right? When you are in that space where you're not ready to talk to anybody, but now everybody and their mama is checking on you. If you just go ahead and bop back to that first person and they say, I hollered at him, he all right, or he did reach back out to me, leave him alone, he's straight, I'll get back at him in a couple days or whatever. So sometimes that other communication can seal the connection in a way.
Android users like John wouldn't appreciate this, but when you get that ... and it's waiting, you waiting for, like, I know you see me, saw my text, and you didn't. You saw that ...
You don't even have the full context of what you're saying, Greg, right now. Because John and I, when you said, oh yeah, we were supposed to clown you for the message you sent us earlier, for the audio message where you sent us, where you accused us of calling you out when we did not.
That's right.
And so I said to John,
Man,
I said, I didn't even send him the text yet asking where he was at. And I said to him, I said, he must have saw the bubbles. He said, he must have saw the dots.
I did not.
I said, because
I just felt guilty because I'm late.
in your
I said, I got to let him know something.
And I said to him, I said, he just felt guilty. I said, he just felt guilty on his own and sent it over. Because I said, There's no, I said, the only
Man.
way is if he saw the three dots, because I had typed in there, yo, son, what's with it, right? And then right as I typed that in, that's when your
Here
message
you
came
go.
over
Right.
saying, I'm pulling into the
You
garage
go to
now.
garage.
Wow.
I said, I didn't even send it yet. Maybe he saw the three dots, saw me
That's
typing, and so
right.
then he just said something real quick, said, I'm in the garage now.
Man. Gosh, man. That's it right there.
That
But
literally
that's what's
just
good,
happened.
man. Laughter in and of itself is good for the soul, man. It's
It
good for the
is.
health, good for
And
the wellness.
you can
So,
laugh by yourself, but it
right,
feels so much better when you laugh along
right,
with others.
If you're
right,
laughing by yourself, sustain it because your brain can't really tell the difference why you're laughing. It
right.
can't tell if it's really funny or not, but it still has the same chemical
Same
effects.
benefit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
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 So, if you
Same
have to be by
benefit.
yourself and you're feeling kind of down, go ahead and laugh. Just go
Yep.
ahead, get a
Right,
good belly laugh
Or
for 30
cry. Or
seconds.
cry. Or cry.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Or cry. Shoot, that's still good too. You need to let it
Mm-hmm.
out sometimes, and that's okay as well.
Which is
So,
actually one of the dope lines in the De La Soul album since we started there. He talks
Mm-hmm.
about summer storms and like, it's all a part of life and like how I just pretty profound.
I forgot which lyric it was. I saw something similar to that where they talked about how they really appreciated walking in the rain, so that you didn't see my tears coming down
Yep.
type deal. You
Yep.
know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And it's
Yep.
like it's again, it's that we have to have moments when we're gonna feel vulnerable.
Yep.
And it's okay. It's okay again, brothers. It's okay. So yeah, that De La Soul album is it's on point though, bro.
It's grown middle-aged man stuff for sure.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
And that's
But
what we're
listen,
here doing. That's what we're
yeah,
here doing. So middle age.
right. That's it. That's it.
So I think we can continue this conversation. I think we'll probably have a different version of it later. I think it's rich and not Rich Holloway, but it's rich. And there's a way in which, y'all know the work that I do that I've emphasized with folks the need to invest in sort of mental wellness, and that the way you do that is like create community, right? Like you can't like one of the things we do all the time. We fight, we win. Like that's our whole mantra, right? But man, it would sure be better if we had a community of people who felt loved and
Right.
protected and considered. And
Right.
that, by the way, I don't want to get too political, but that's the work that I do. And so I'm thinking, I think all the time, like, what are we doing to make a space for people to feel welcomed and considered and seen and heard? Because
Right.
if you don't got that, like the bad guys, they get that in spades, right?
Right.
Those who consider ourselves to be fighting for better things haven't figured that out yet.
Right. Now we
I
have
don't
to be
think you have to.
intentional. Go ahead, Rich. Go
Go
ahead,
ahead,
Rick.
go
Go
ahead,
ahead.
John.
No,
Oh,
no,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
I was just going to say, don't be too concerned about being too political. I'd say it's more of a concern in today's world about being too partisan, right?
Yep. 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 Yep.
We need as a society to feel comfortable enough with each other to talk about the real issues and things of that nature. But the problem go down all kinds of rabbit holes about why that's so hard, and because we got so many stupid people out here doing stupid things. But no, don't. Before I get all way off pocket, to your point though, GK, when you're not talking about something partisan. You're talking about addressing needs within our communities, and I think ultimately that involves or needs to involve political conversations, just like
Yep.
it needs to involve economic conversations, social conversations about a lot of different things. So it's cool to talk about those things. I think it's a needed thing, just like we need to talk about these different health risk factors that we're talking about now, because it's all part of the whole same package. And if you just talk about these things and divorce and exclude these other things, we
Yep.
never
Right.
ever have a full, complete picture. And again, that's an area of relative expertise for you, right? Because I give you a hard time about the Democratic Party leadership and things of that nature, but ultimately, though, like you said, your primary space is organizing people and creating connection and things like that. And so that's more than germane to this topic. So
Yeah.
don't worry about the political side of things. Let's talk about some of that other stuff. John, you said something, or you were talking about some things earlier that made me think about a term that often comes up in the context of emotional stressors or things like that. But essentially, this notion of life stages or important stages, or
Mm-hmm.
the word I was looking for earlier that just popped back into my head was crisis, right? This notion of being in crisis
Right.
or the
Right.
need for intervention, right? Life changes can bring on these things,
Right.
Yep.
right? Too many life changes, even if they're good things, right? If you get married, you get pregnant, and you buy a
Right.
new house, all
All of
in
that.
in
Yeah.
45 days,
Sun's
you can
settling.
still end up in crisis, even though all of these life changes were quote unquote good things.
Good.
So the reality of, like you said, someone retirement or changing jobs, or these other things that can happen, and somebody moving to a new city, right? That automatically has the potential to create some social isolation, excuse me, just by virtue of the fact that you don't know anything about any of these neighborhoods or the people in
Right.
there. And it's going to take you some
Yeah.
time. Even if
Right.
you are a social person that's going to get out, it could create some
Right.
problems. Just different changes and stages of life can impact all of this. I think it's important to talk about that.
Nah, so the way we try to really work through that, Rich, those are great points that you're bringing up, is we got to get back to understanding that we got to encourage purpose. We got to understand that if we have purpose, we can combat loneliness, okay? Because then we're feeling like there's a reason for what we're here to be able to do, either for ourselves or for others around us as well. There was a report that suggested that 75% of adults who say they're lonely feel like they lack purpose or meaning. And it's like, wow, okay, well then let's help that. Purpose does what for us? It helps us with having a structure. It helps us with having direction. So as I was mentioning earlier about retirement, what makes people feel lonely after retirement is they're no longer with that work crowd. They no longer are going in and doing something or feeling like they have purpose or meaning anymore. And
Yeah.
that's where that depression can really start to set in. And if it
And a lot
happens
of them go
around this
home and
time
they're
of
getting on
year,
their wives'
that's
nerves.
sad. And they start right, exactly too. And
Because
that doesn't help. Right.
I saw a classic example of that. The firm that I used to work for when I practiced law back in the day, the father had been practicing law since literally like 1930s, right? And he
Yeah.
finally was getting ready to retire. And it was that classic old school northern Chicago kind of lifestyle where he went to work he got on the train every morning, took it into the city and worked for 8, 10 hours and then went home. For 50 years, she had the house to herself all day, every day. You know, she was the queen of the home. And now that he's retired, he's in the damn way all the time, and
Right.
he's got
Right.
nothing
Right.
to do. And the challenge is how do I even stay alive? We say that we see so many
Right.
people retire, they
And
just
then
go retire, go
Right.
home and die
Right.
because they don't have that purpose, like you said. It's
Right.
just they just
Well,
go and shut down or turn it
Right.
off.
well, we know our society has gotten worse. We haven't even gotten into the ways in which our current like economic structure or the way that capitalism is functioning in sort of this late stage sort of thing. One of the classic books on this is by a cat named Putnam, and it's called Bowling Alone, right? Like we grew up in a period where like there were bowling leagues, there was like the neighborhood, I don't know what they call it.
Gatherings and picnics,
Yeah, like
community events.
yeah.
Yep.
So much of that was a normal thing. The union halls, like all these things were like things we grew up with that are basically gone now, right? And so Putnam has been making this argument for a couple of decades now, right? We bowl alone instead of being in leagues, and we as a society are struggling as a result of it. And in the United States, that's like foundational to who we are. Not to get too academic about it, but that's de Tocqueville. Like when he came and he like looked at the US, he was like, yo, what makes the US so dope is that we had all these organizations and ways for people to connect. And so was who we are. So we built out all these things that are now completely been destroyed. And so something's taking its place. I think part of it is what social media is about. But again, it's this notion of people needing to come together that helps create social
Yeah.
cohesion and all these, all the stuff
That's
that
because
matters.
people haven't
Right.
changed fundamentally at all. Our technology continues to
Exactly.
change over time. And so we adapt what we do to different ways and spaces, but we're still socially pretty much the same animal.
Yep. It's why people, like every ethnic group that went into major cities, they had what they call gangs, right? Or they had whatever ethnic group you want
Right.
to name, they all had
Right.
gangs because they
Yeah.
needed that social connection with each other.
Yeah,
right?
and there's sociological and criminological theories behind that talk about and look at how oftentimes it's the structure of a neighborhood more so than the people, because we see it in Chicago, right? There are examples right now on the north side of Chicago that are predominantly Hispanic, right? And they hold their Catholic mass in a church that still has Polish writing in the stone, right, outside. Because
Yep.
what we've seen over time is that different ethnic groups move into neighborhoods, and then because there was this historical there was this historical goal of getting to the suburbs. They started out in the inner city, then you move out further from the center of the city into other neighborhoods, in the goal of trying to eventually get to the suburbs. But what happens is that the criminals in each neighborhood teach the next wave of criminals that are coming in. So it's really, it doesn't have anything to do with the groups of people that are living there. They just happen to live there. So whether you're black, white, Hispanic, Asian, they all learn the same tricks of the trade, because those trades work in this particular neighborhood. And oftentimes it's about the architecture, it's about the design of the neighborhood more so than the people. But it gets passed along, at least in theory, from one group to the next. It doesn't have anything to do with who they are. It's how the place was made. It's kind of wild, as some of the stuff that is undergirding some of these social, because we're social is what it is, what it's ultimately about. Because we connect, we can pass it along from one group to the next through people. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. So I think, we're getting to the end here. I think it's important to say that loneliness or social isolation, or whatever way we would characterize it, really has impacts, on our body, our mind, and our spirit. Current moment as a culture, as a society, is really making it worse. Technology gives us a false sense of community. Black men, it's even more intense. And so got to figure out what our purpose is, reconnecting ourselves to each other. It's like incredibly important to help address it, but like just identifying what it is really feels like a really important place to start. And our purpose really should define how we begin that conversation with ourselves. What y'all think?
Yeah, I want to say, remember we talked a little bit about how community involvement can really help with that. We talked about mentorship before. Remember how that can help combat loneliness and these feelings, because it gives purpose back again. If we're able to help mentor, if we're able to give to our community, if we can help be a part of these organizations and opportunities, again, rebuilds that purpose. Going back to church,
Yeah.
being involved and things of that nature, and you have to find what that church looks like for you, type deal. It may not be that this was the church I was born in, raised in, and I'm going to die in. You've evolved. We've all evolved. So that may not be that kind of spiritual intention that you need. So you may have to seek that and find that in order to find your wellness from that as well too. And then working on our health. Get in walking groups, get some fellas together or whatnot, and say, look, y'all, let's all just, do some walking or go running or cycling or dancing, any of those things that can also build on making sure that we're taking care of our health and wellness. What do you think, Rick?
I think that you hit the nail on the head there, brother. I think about personally some of the, I guess, ways that I try to form those connections. Because, one of the realities for me personally is I work from home, right? So that's a form of isolation, at least in that,
Mm-hmm.
I'm in a workspace by myself. My cat died a year ago who had been there for 16 years, right? And so the entire time that I've been a remote worker, at least he was there in the background. So it can be silent. When I did work in a physical office, I was a bit of a social butterfly in that, I would be moving over here, chatting with people over here, chatting with people, doing that kind of stuff in between getting work done, of course, but there's no opportunity for that in this setting, so my communications all day long are electronic, or I'm in Zoom meetings or team meetings, or I'm texting with somebody, or I'm FaceTiming, and that kind of thing, to try and create some of that for myself, some connection. I get out in the decent weather. I like to get out and walk in the park, and usually I see people when I'm out there doing that, but also it's giving me that vitamin D, as you were talking about, John, getting out in the
Right.
sun and making sure of that. Because personally, years ago, broke a bone in my shin or whatever, and at that time they were like, "Yeah, your vitamin D is low," you know. And so since then, that had been a focus. I was like, wow, I didn't even know it was, and didn't even, learn the hard way that I wasn't in as good a shape as I thought I was. But I think for me too, sharing my health journey and talking with people about it and being open about the things that I'm doing is another way to try and connect. It's another way to share. It's another place for me to have some purpose. Doing this podcast with you all is another place and space for me. And that's why, I enjoy the conversations, not just because it's you two and we have been doing this for years anyway, but because especially after when I run into people that I've shared it with, when we get the comments from people like your friend, the psychologist, John, that is rather faithful in providing feedback, which we really appreciate. So that's purpose, right? All of
Right.
that. And so creating those opportunities for ourselves to have purpose, to do things that are meaningful to us and provide that
Right.
support to the community.
Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes, remember, seeking counseling, seeking therapy is fine to do as well. Okay.
Mhm.
Don't run away from it. Don't shy away from it. Don't think that you got the answers, because remember, if you talking to yourself, you're going to always find whatever helps you for yourself type deal. But that's where therapy and counseling comes in, because that should be neutral kind of space that they can now help guide you through that journey as well.
And that's again not a weakness. I mean, let's be real. If you've actually gone through counseling in any meaningful way, you'll find out that it takes a lot of courage
Yeah.
to actually, again, we're talking about that vulnerability piece,
Being
right?
vulnerable.
Being vulnerable. And so it takes a lot of courage to be truly introspectful, to be honest with yourself and with that person about yourself, about your
Yes.
thoughts, about those quiet places in your brain where you tuck stuff away.
Yeah.
So, there's nothing weak about it. It's very difficult. It can be very challenging. Again, it requires courage sometimes, but it's worth it. When you get
Right.
on the other side of whatever those issues or feelings are or were. So,
Yeah.
go ahead and do it. It's not a sign of weakness. It's going to build your strength. It's one of those things that, will make you stronger in the long run.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
GK, you started us off, brother. You want to give us some takeaways and
Yeah. So
get us
again,
ready to
I
close
think
it
it's
out?
important to remember that loneliness, social isolation, however we describe it, has all kinds of impacts. Some seen, some unseen, some felt, some not felt. And we have a way in which we can address these things by being in community with other people. Doesn't have to be in person, but figure out whatever it is that you need to make sure that you are in community with other folks, so that loneliness isn't a thing that's hurting you. Sort of like this idea of being together, as Dr. Murthy refers to it, together or togetherness. So, well, this has been great, gentlemen. I enjoyed the conversation. For our listeners, you've been listening to Raw and Refined, where we unpack the real issues that shape our lives as Black men, from health to heart to healing. And if our conversation hit you somehow in the gut, in the belly. Share this episode with someone who might need it. Reach out to a friend or an enemy, by the way, you haven't been in contact with for a while, or take a minute tonight to reflect on your own personal sense of purpose. Remember, you don't have to do this thing called life by yourself and disconnect it. We're all walking this road in some way together, as Dr. Murthy referred to it. And my name is Greg. I'm with my guys, John and Rich. And as always, stay grounded, stay real, and stay connected. And we'll holler at y'all next time.
Excellent.
Peace.
Excellent.
Outstanding. That was it, brother. That was, man, that's some great conversation right there.